Condor Games and Silicon and Synapse originally met when the two of them were both contracted to create two different versions of a Justice League game for the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. Silicon and Synapse would rename themselves shortly afterwards to Blizzard Entertainment, with Condor merging into the company and becoming Blizzard North. Blizzard North would then begin working on a new IP centered around fighting demons in an old cathedral, which would be released in 1997 as Diablo. Unlike Warcraft and Warcraft 2 before it, Diablo had a much darker and grim atmosphere to it that is still fondly remembered even today. Diablo did not have as much of a story at first, with the final cinematic being developed outside of Blizzard North and given to them by the cinematics team, but given its smaller scope of just a single town, every character and enemy is dripping with story and personality that tends to be lost with larger games. For this series I will only be covering the base game for Diablo, and will not be covering the Hellfire expansion, as it doesn't really have much to do with anything in Diablo's story. If you would like to brave the Tristram Cathedral with me, subscribe for more. The quiet town of Tristram was not much to look at. Only a few dozen families or so lived in the small town, located in the kingdom of Condurus. It had originally been founded by an ancient group known as the Herodrim that had long since died out. They would settle into the area, and over the years, other farmers would travel and move in, and the town would grow. The only thing of note in Tristram was the old crumbling monastery that lay on the edge of the town. Built by the original Herodrim that lived in the area, the monastery had fallen into ruin over the centuries, and now all that lay was a broken monument to the past. All of this changed with the arrival of the Zakarum faithful from the eastern lands of Kyrgyzstan. Among them was King Leoric, who had come to Condurus to proclaim himself king and was seeking a land to become his seat of power. At the council of Archbishop Lazarus, he chose the backwater town of Tristram. Leoric was once a member of the Zakarum Church over in Kyrgyzstan, and at their behest he journeyed west to declare that he was the king of Condurus. Bringing along his family, his knights, and a number of priests, he would claim the old abandoned monastery as his seat of power. At first, the locals were not too keen on Leoric's arrival, especially as he was a king that came from a foreign land, but he ruled with kindness and wisdom that won over the people. A manor was constructed outside of the town, and the monastery would be restored to its former glory. It would become a cathedral to the Zakarum, and intended on using the structure for religious purposes. Years of peace went on, but they would not last. A shadow began to creep over Leoric that started out small at first, but would rapidly overtake him. He began to grow irrational, but it would soon swell into a madness and paranoia that earned him the name the Black King of Tristram. It was only when he declared war on the neighboring kingdom of Westmarch that the depths of his insanity became known. Leoric's armies marched into Westmarch. Those close to him tried to plead the war was both unjust and unwise, but Leoric was convinced that Westmarch was plotting against him. Hoping to earn his approval, Leoric's eldest son, Aidan, would travel to the battlefield. Leoric's mind was shattered with the disappearance of his youngest son, Ulbrich, and he lashed out at everyone around him. After having his own wife executed, he began to persecute the nearby townsfolk and have them tortured and killed. When Leoric's soldiers returned from the war to see the state of their ruler, the knight Lochdonan was accused of the kidnapping, and with a heavy heart, him and his men were forced to put down their once beloved king. With Leoric's dying breath, he cursed his murderers so that they may never find peace in death. Despite all that had happened, Lochdonan and his fellow knights still cared for the king Leoric used to be, and so they buried him within his beloved cathedral. After the burial, Lochdonan and his knights were never seen again. Tristram would not be spared further troubles, however, as people began to disappear from the town at night, and screams could be heard from the depths of the cathedral. Without Leoric or Lochdonan, the people turned to Archbishop Lazarus for answers. His reports brought dire news, as he had gone into the cathedral only to encounter vile demons and ravenous undead. Pointing out that Prince Ulbrich was still missing, it was possible that he was somewhere within the cathedral, alive and held prisoner by the denizens for their own nefarious plans. Lazarus rallied a number of townsfolk to descend into the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the cathedral. Farnham would carry his friend Griswold to safety, but the experience would leave him a broken drunk. Deckard Cain, the last member of the Herodrim, theorized that the cathedral was built on top of some ancient evil the Herodrim had hidden away. News of the events in Tristram began to spread, attracting heroes in search of gold, glory, or justice. Many would die within the cathedral, but there were 3 that would step up to the challenge. The war in Westmarch was a complete disaster, with the armies of Condurus torn apart by the enemy soldiers. Few would return home, but among them was Prince Aidan. His time in Westmarch had hardened him, but he was ill prepared for when he came back to an empty home. Both his mother and father lay dead, and his younger brother was missing. The land was ravaged by Leoric's insanity. Demons dwelt within the old cathedral, and his kingdom was falling to ruin. Holding on to the hope that Albrecht was still alive, Aidan vowed to enter the cathedral to save his only surviving family left, and to rid the ruin of the demonic power that had laid claim to it. Upon returning to Tristram, he is warned by Deckard Cain of the horrors deep below the earth. The undead and demons that stalk its darkened corridors had already claimed too many lives, but it was not a journey he would have to make alone. He would find companionship in the rogue Morena and the sorcerer Jazrith. Long ago, the artifact known as the Sightless Eye was hidden on the Scovos Isles by a man named Philios. Forces from outside the world of Sanctuary had yet to be alerted to their presence, but the Eye was a risk he could not take. His twin daughters would find the Sightless Eye and make their home on the island. The Ascari society would emerge around them, with the Sightless Eye at the heart of their culture, as it had the ability to peer across time and space. The group of Ascari, known more colloquially as Amazons, would steal the artifact. They would flee to Condurus and take up residence in Eastgate Keep, becoming a secretive guild of rogues known as the Sisterhood of the Sightless Eye. They would recruit women from all walks of life into their order, training them into deadly assassins. Their skills with a bow were unparalleled, apart from their Amazon cousins. Hearing of the darkness emanating from Tristram, members of their order would depart in search of gold and treasure hidden in its vaults. Among them was Morena, who would join Aidan's quest. At the height of their power, 7 major and 7 minor mage clans would thrive. The 3 most prominent clans were the Amuit, the Ennead, and the Vigerai. Each clan was culturally and geographically diverse, governing themselves. The Vigerai believed that there existed spirits outside of Sanctuary and would eventually succeed in summoning a demon from another world. This act would kick off a long conflict between the mage clans, as well as alerting other forces to the existence of Sanctuary. Following the Sin War, the mage clans would claim power in Kyrgyzstan, and the Vigerai would continue to summon demons in secret, leading to the Mage Wars. The outcome of these wars was the shunning of mages, ending the Age of Magic and heralding the Age of Faith. The Vigerai became a shadow of their former selves, but would later be welcomed into Chaldeum to turn the city into a prosperous one. Hearing the rumors of Tristram, many mages went out to investigate, with Jazrith heading out in search of forgotten knowledge and joining with Aidan and Morena.
The sanctity of this place has been fouled.
As one approaches the cathedral, an eerie red glow pours out from further in. A bloodied adventurer lies on the steps, warning others of the monster that Lazarus and his party encountered within. Lazarus abandoned his mob and left them to die at the hands of the Butcher. Entering the cathedral, it becomes clear that the vermin infesting the old monastery have gained such a hold over the structure that even the entryway holds risen skeletons, demonic fallen, and scavengers that feed on the corpses of prior adventurers. The player is struck with a sickening feeling as they enter the cathedral, and the old shrines of faith and sarcophagi still rest inside, along with chests of gold that was stored here by the Zakarum faithful. The drinking water of the town has become tainted and poisoned, making anyone that drinks it deathly ill. Although Griswold attempted to clear out one of the smaller wells, the water remained toxic and stagnant, implying that the issue was with the water's source. Ogden, the tavern owner, has been keeping a store of food and drink in his cellar, but without access to the wells, it won't be long until he runs out. Pepin, the healer, believes that there is a passage that leads to the spring that supplies the town's drinking water, while Cain has heard of a passageway that leads to a great underground lake, although he does not know if this lake is the same aquifer. While investigating the cathedral, a dark passage leads to the source of the water, where the underground spring is filled with demonic entities. As it turns out, their very presence is harmful to the land, and the water became tainted due to the nearby demons. With them cleared out, the waters return to normal, and a small bit of hope is returned to the town. A trail of blood winds its way through the cathedral's lower levels. As one follows it, it only grows thicker and, more disturbingly, fresher. The sounds of heavy chopping echoes off the walls, and with each step forward the sound only grows louder. Upon opening the door the blood leads to, one is confronted with bodies hanging off of meat hooks from the ceiling, and the grotesque monstrosity wielding a large cleaver.
Fresh meat.
Those that manage to escape from the butcher's grasp are still not safe, as any cuts from his cleaver will fester and rot, nearly impossible to treat. The butcher slaughtered many that entered the cathedral and left his mark on a number of the townspeople.
Big cleaver, killing all my friends!
The butcher has since become an iconic part of Diablo, and while there isn't much story behind the demon itself, its impact on the world and the players that faced it down is undeniable. The Butcher is the vibes of Diablo.
The warmth of life has entered my tomb.
Even in death, Leoric would not find peace. His bones would stir once more and rise as the gruesome skeleton king, capable of reanimating others buried within the crypts and catacombs of the cathedral. Within his tomb, the knights that assisted in his death now protect him in mindless servitude. If he is allowed to remain, Leoric will continue to raise more from their graves, creating an army that will scour the land in service to an even darker master that has chained Leoric in death. A great evil that, as it would turn out, was the cause of Leoric's madness. The demonic presence beneath the cathedral reached out to Leoric and attempted to take control of his mind and body to make the king into his unwilling vessel. Leoric's mind was resolute, however, and would not fall under the control of such an entity, but the struggle took its toll over time, and as his mind began to unravel, the tragedy of the Mad King played out. With Aiden's journey down into the cathedral taking him to his father's tomb, he gives his father a second death and puts his soul to rest. The Khazra, or Goatmen, are part goat, part human creatures that have had their lore changed in nearly every Diablo game. In the first Diablo, they occupy 4 different clans within the tunnels, ranging from the weak yet crafty Flesh clan to the physically imposing Night clan. While exploring the bottom layers of the cathedral, a Khazra named Garbad can be encountered, asking the player to spare his life. In exchange for his life, he offers to create something special for the player, even offering a magical item as proof of his sincerity. The player can visit him a number of times, being given the magical item on the second visit, and Garbad asking the player's patience on the third visit, as he's almost finished with the promised item. Upon the fourth visit, he will claim that what he has crafted is too good for the player and attack. As Garbad is not very strong, he will go down easily, and exclaim that he is not impressed by the player. The player can then grab the mace that was crafted and carry on their way. Just one of the many strange interactions that occur within the cathedral. Late one night, the tavern keeper Ogden had heard scraping noises just outside. When he went to investigate, he spotted a group of small, demon-like creatures just outside of his door, stealing his sign. Although he thinks it's strange they would steal his sign and leave his family alone, he nonetheless asks the adventurers to retrieve it. The sign is guarded by several powerful demons, but even after taking them out, the chest the sign resides in is locked. The key to the chest is held by a small dark one named Snotspill, guarding the door to the lower catacombs. Snotspill believes that the sign is some sort of magical banner, and while he holds the key to the chest, he is nowhere near strong enough to challenge the overlords guarding it. Instead, he tasks the player with killing the overlords and gives the key to them, demanding that they instead bring him the sign. With the key in hand and the overlord slain, the sign is returned to Ogden, and Snotspill becomes enraged, attacking the player. With his death, the path further down opens.
The smell of death surrounds me.
The catacombs beneath the cathedral form a series of twisting and winding corridors that one can easily get lost in. The dead that were laid to rest here have risen from their graves and haunt the claustrophobic tunnels along with more Khazra. It isn't just the townsfolk or the Zakarum that were entombed here, but deeper in lie the old dusty bones of the Haradrim that built the catacombs and the monastery on top of it. Although this area does not have any significant bosses, it does hold relics from the past, as well as the work of those that have gone mad in the darkness. As the player ventures from the cathedral into the ancient tunnels, they will open up a shortcut between the catacombs at the crypt and the cemetery near Tristram, allowing easier access to the lost dead in the gloomy halls beneath the earth. And so, locked behind the gateway of blood and past the hall of fire, valor awaits for the hero of light to awaken. So says an old book found in the catacombs. The legendary armor Valor was worn by the hero Arcane during the Sin War of centuries past, where he helped to expel the demonic hordes from Sanctuary. Before his death, his armor was hidden away somewhere. Once the book has been read, the way opens for the player to figure out its riddle. Entering the chamber behind the hidden door, a lone pedestal stands, carved of obsidian and filled with blood atop its bone-encrusted surface. Nearby, in yet more hidden chambers, are the keys that can be inserted into the pedestal that will unlock the path. These keys are actually small demonic creatures that have cooled and hardened into bloodstones. With 3 of them inserted into the pedestal, the final door opens, behind which lies the legendary armor of Arcane. Perhaps it will help once again to vanquish the forces of the burning hells. The blacksmith Griswold stops the player for a moment when they stop up at town, telling them a story. Before Aiden returned to Tristram, a group of merchants had stopped for supplies. One of them held a great stone he claimed had fallen from the heavens themselves. According to Cain, the stone was bound for the east to be studied, as the stone had the ability to grant men great sight by some supernatural means. The merchants had set off from Tristram, but were ambushed by a number of dark riders, who took the stone down into the catacombs. Should the player find this magic stone, Griswold asks that they bring it back to him to fashion into something useful and help you on your journey. Found in the upper layers of the catacombs, the stone shines with a bright light as it sits on a pedestal, ready to be found. Giving it over to Griswold, he will create a special, unique ring, granting the player an increased light radius, increased stats, and absorbs damage from traps. A useful item for exploring the dark catacombs, giving the blessing of the heavens to one fighting the forces of hell. Beyond the Hall of Heroes lies the Chamber of Bone. Eternal death awaits any who would seek to steal the treasures secured within this room. So speaks the Lord of Terror, and so it is written. A treasure vault is hidden within the crypts, holding the various spoils from a great demon of old, now trapped in the deepest caverns of the monastery. Inside of this hidden chamber, a number of powerful demons guard the wealth of magic and gold. Not all of the guardians are willing, however. Talking to Cain on the matter, you will bring up that when he studied in Eastern libraries, he learned of great demonic treasure hoards, where those foolish enough to try and steal from it would perish, whether it be from the various traps or from the denizens therein. Regardless, they would be raised in undeath and forever bound to protect the hoard. Should the player successfully enter the Chamber of Bone and fight their way to its deepest rooms, they will be rewarded with not just gold and enchanted items, but a spell tome of Guardian, which will be useful for our descent. I can see what you see not, vision milky, then eyes rot. When you turn they will be gone, whispering their hidden song. Then you see what cannot be, shadows move where light should be. Out of darkness, out of mind, cast down into the halls of the blind. Yet another old book found in the catacombs, and so yet another treasure for the player to seek. The poem inside speaks of a series of winding corridors where the damned are left to wander without their eyes. Entering the hidden chamber that is now opened, invisible enemies will stalk the player, only briefly appearing when they are attacking. The hidden will ambush any that enter the halls, but are dispatched by Aiden and his party, allowing access to the final chamber where the optic amulet lies. When talking to Cain about the original poem, he is reminded of a similar work. Darkness shrouds the hidden, eyes glowing unseen with only the sounds of razor claws, briefly scraping to torment those poor souls that have been made sightless for all eternity. The prison for those so damned is named the Halls of the Blind. The dead are not the only ones that stalk the dark catacombs, for the mad dwell there as well. Czar the Mad is one such man, and lost his mind long ago within the crypts. Sheltered away in his makeshift library, he works tirelessly on something that only makes sense to himself. Upon encountering Czar, he will attempt to shoo the player away, complaining that all of the interruptions are driving him insane, even attempting to bribe the player with a spell tome to leave him alone. The pedestals around the room are full of various scrolls that Czar has collected, along with the bookshelf along the wall, although attempting to steal from it will invoke the mad sorcerer's wrath. Though his magic is more than formidable, he falls just the same as any other lost soul within the cathedral, and his fractured mind is at last laid to rest. Upon his death, the player character references the movie Pulp Fiction, uttering the line,
"Oh, I'm sorry, did I break your concentration?"
It's hot down here.
By this point, the player has completed half of their journey to finding the source of the demonic corruption that has taken claim over the cathedral, and has traveled deeper than any other traveler before them. The caverns that the catacombs were built on top of were found by the ancient Horodrim, where they built a prison at its lowest levels. The caverns are filled with rivers of lava and crawling with ever more terrifying monstrosities, but there is not much going on in this section of the game, as only 2 quests can be found in the caves. The rest of the player's time will be spent navigating its treacherous caverns and fighting off more Khazra, lava-spitting demons, gargoyles, and other horrors that are pouring out from deeper still. Aiden and his party press on, knowing in his heart that his brother still lives, and that with each floor they clear and every set of stairs they descend, they grow closer and closer to Albrecht. An old stairway leads back up, however, and allows them to quickly reach Tristram from a hidden path through the rocky crags just north of the town. An odd fungal tome within the cave networks is of interest to the witch Adria, who lives just on the outskirts of the town. Something inside catches her eye that she would like to brew, but requires a few key ingredients that the player will need to retrieve for her. The first of which is a large black mushroom. A patch of such mushrooms does grow within the caves, and bringing her the largest of the mushrooms will prompt Adria to point the player in the direction of Pepin. The healer has been trying to get his hands on a demon's brain in order to create an elixir. Perhaps if their essence can be distilled, it can be used to heal those affected by their poison. Apart from healing the sick, Adria requires a sample of such an elixir to finish her brew. Grateful for the assistance, Pepin will inform the player of the brain that they need, and upon bringing it back to him, he will happily take it for further study. With the gift of the elixir given to the player, they return to Adria, only for her to have already found a way to finish her work without it. Since she has no more use for it, you may as well just keep it. Constructed from the skulls and bones of demons, carved with powerful runes and infused with raw chaos, the Anvil of Fury was a terrible artifact that lay within the Hellforge. Now it lies somewhere within the caves, and Griswold is hoping to get his hands on it. According to legend, any weapon smithed on the anvil is enchanted with great power, and such a weapon could prove useful in slaying whatever is imprisoned down below. Of course, acquiring the anvil is no easy task. Guarded by great horned demons and Khazra minions, the forces of hell will not part with such an artifact easily. But with the anvil in hand, its magic can be used by the light instead of the darkness. With it, Griswold begins work on his finest piece he has ever made, a magical sword named Griswold's Edge. Though wielding the blade saps a portion of its bearer's life, the price is well worth it for the powerful blade. Its strength will be turned against the forces of hell, and see that terror never walks the world again.
I must be getting close.
At long last, the lowest layers of the cathedral has been reached, although it is a grotesque sight. Walls of bone holding back rivers of blood surround the player, as they walk along carpets of flesh. Bodies litter the ground and hang off of the walls, as the most fearsome of demons and the most mad of sorcerers prevent anyone from going further down. A blood-red crevasse behind Pepin's clinic provides a short path back up to Tristram, but the way down to the final chamber is barred to the player. The way was sealed by a powerful mage, and by collecting his staff the way can be opened. Curiously, it isn't clear what sort of corruption has caused these lowest levels to become what they are. Perhaps the very presence of the demon lord has warped its immediate prison into becoming something more closely resembling its home within the burning hells. Or perhaps the demon is attempting to draw in a portion of the burning hells, blurring the lines between realms. For the sake of Sanctuary, one can only hope for the former. When the Orcs Knights were turned into the undead, Lochdonan managed to escape the corruption that had gripped his companions, but was cursed all the same. Retaining his free will, he retreated deeper into the Catacombs to seek out an elixir that could have lifted the curse. But now, so close to salvation, Lochdonan lacks the strength to carry on. Barely keeping a hold of his sanity, he pleads with Aidan to find him the elixir, so that he may pass peacefully into death. He dared not return to Tristram, lest he succumb to the curse, and as he lost what remained of his strength, he was struggling to hold off the curse. Just a little ways deeper, a golden elixir can be found within the burning hells. Bringing it back to Lochdonan, he thanks Aidan, leaving behind his enchanted helmet, as where Lochdonan is going, he won't be needing it anymore. Once human, the Warlord of Blood sided with Hell during the Sin War and gave in to his thirst for blood, twisting his form into a horrific and demonic knight. During the war, he left a trail of corpses in his wake, and now he guards the way down to the prison, surrounded by his Hell Knights. Having known only thousands of years of death and destruction, he has prepared himself against any magic his opponents might throw at him, rendering him immune to fire, lightning, and many other spells. Only facing this monster head-on will deal any lasting damage, should light be on your side. Though it is difficult, a player can slip by the Warlord and progress down to the rest of the hellish prison. So deep down, only one more floor stands between you and the lowest levels of the prison, where the Horadrim stored a great and terrible evil.
You are too late to save the child. Now you will join him in hell.
The path to the final level is locked away, and bringing Lazarus' staff back to Cain will open a red portal leading to the corrupt priest. Lazarus, once an advisor to King Leoric, convinced him to come to Tristram so that he may unleash terror upon the world. He weakened Leoric's mind by attempting to turn him into the demon's vessel and sent his armies away to Westmarch. He led Albrecht down into the catacomb as a sacrifice and left his mob to die, as their death strengthened his master. The corrupt Zachrum Archbishop, the cause of so much suffering in Tristram, had worked to awaken the one chained beneath the earth. Aidan's party confronted Lazarus, ready to sacrifice a young boy, and killed the treacherous priest. Though the young boy was not Albrecht, the lock to the final level is opened. Aidan, Morena, and Jazrith head through the pentagram on the floor, ready to face whatever monstrosity is imprisoned down below.
The smell of life surrounds me.
At the threshold of hell itself, Diablo wakes. The Lord of Terror was the last of the three great prime evils to be imprisoned by the ancient Horadrim, following his brothers Mephisto and Baal. Though initially weakened by his long slumber, Diablo has been feeding off of the fear of the town above. Imprisoned within a red soulstone, he had been locked far below the earth and the prison sealed over. Aiden and his companions fought their own fear as they battled against Diablo. Should they fall here, Diablo would break free and tear open the prisons of his brethren, and the world of Sanctuary would be plunged forever into darkness. And yet they would prove victorious, with Aiden securing the last blow against the prime evil. With his last breath, a horrible wail erupted from his mouth that could be heard even in the town up above, as Diablo's essence was reabsorbed into the Soul Stone. As the body of Diablo began to unravel and decay, the dying body of Albrecht remained. With the orc's mind proving too strong, Lazarus had used his young son as Diablo's new vessel. The process had damaged the Soul Stone, and without a proper way to contain him, Diablo would return again. Left with little other choice, Aiden took hold of the Soul Stone and plunged it into his own forehead. As blood ran down across his eyes, he could feel Diablo clawing at the back of his mind, trying to claim control, but Aiden pushed down the demon to the dark recesses of his soul. Diablo would be contained within Aiden, and he would wrestle with the demon for as long as he needed to. Though he was not able to save his brother, he had a new task ahead of him. Aiden and his party claimed victory, but at a steep price. Aiden's life in Tristram became haunted by living nightmares, and the whispers of the damned called to him. He spent many nights with the witch Adria trying to find a way to alleviate his affliction, but nothing helped. Instead, Aiden would feel something pulling at his soul, a desire to head east. He knew not what dangers awaited him, but perhaps in the ruined civilizations beyond the deserts of Aranok, he would find salvation. Aiden would leave Tristram behind and travel into the east. Morena and Jazrith would follow after him. Morena returned to Eastgate Keep and reunited with her sisterhood there, and Jazrith traveled to Lut Golain in search of the great mage Horizon. All three of them would be scarred by their experiences within the monastery, and each would fall to demonic influence. Since the entirety of Diablo takes place in a single town, the player will be talking with the same NPCs repeatedly as they progress through the Cathedral. Each of the NPCs will have dialogue on each quest and gossip about one another to the player, giving each one a personality and a place within the town, making it feel much more alive. By the end of your journey, some characters will be a welcome sight to see again every time you return to town, and you get a sense of what sort of information is common knowledge, and what is known only by those that look deeper into what is actually going on in the wider world. I'll be going through each of the characters you can encounter within the town, and seeing how they not only flesh out the town, but how their stories interact with the terror lurking below their feet.
I sense a soul in search of answers.
The witch Adria is a stranger among the people of Tristram. After the troubles in the cathedral drove people to flee from the town, Adria arrived one night and set up a small hut outside of the town, which seemed to spring up by the next morning. There, away from the other villagers, she has a well-stocked supply of potions and sorcery, and offers to recharge any of the player's staves. The people of Tristram are somewhat fearful of her to varying degrees. As a result, rumors swirl around Adria, but it is difficult to ascertain fact from fiction. She has never been seen to eat, drink, or sleep, and her hut is filled with esoteric tomes that are foreign even to Cain. Whatever the truth, Adria knows much more about the cathedral than she lets on, often warning the player of the dangers down below. As strange as she may be, Adria is a welcome ally to Aiden and his companions.
Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
Cain is the last in a long line of magicians and scholars known as the Herodrim, and his ancestor Jared Cain settled in this land long ago, after leading the Herodrim to capture Diablo. Cain never believed the stories he read until the events that transpired in the town. Among the other residents of Tristram, he is a respected historian that one can go to if they have any questions regarding the town, though he has a habit of talking too much. Still, his skill at weaving together a story is second to none, and will aid the player in whatever ways he can along their journey. Deckard Cain has long become a staple of the Diablo series, offering not only his knowledge, but his services in identifying magical items, and a friendly face inviting you to pull up a chair and listen to the great stories of old.
Can't a fellow drink in peace?
An old drunk on the edge of town can be found sitting against one of the houses. Each day he returns to Ogden's Inn and drinks himself into a stupor before stumbling around town once more. Despite this, Farnham remains kind yet tortured. Farnham was one of those that followed Lazarus down into the cathedral and was left traumatized after witnessing his friends and neighbors slaughtered by the butcher. He would be rescued by Griswold, and Pepin did his best to heal Farnham. While he would physically recover from the ordeal, he would be left psychologically broken. The others and Tristram look at Farnham with a mix of pity and frustration, as the only solace he finds is in the bottom of a tankard, and rambles to any who will listen of the darkness that has infected the town.
Good day. How may I serve you?
The barmaid at Ogden's tavern, Gillian, is an innocent soul. The other townsfolk speak highly of her, commenting on her beautiful looks and her high spirits. Although Ogden has tried to get her to leave Tristram due to recent circumstances, Gillian refuses to leave her ailing grandmother. Her grandmother is only mentioned in a few lines in the game, but the impression most others have of her is an old woman that is suffering from delusions. Asking Gillian about her, though, she will claim that her grandmother has visions that can see into the future. She isn't very much help in the game, pointing the player to other townsfolk around the town when asking her for information, and were she a bit more aware of what was actually happening below the town, perhaps she would have taken the offers to help her and her grandmother find somewhere more safe to live.
Well, what can I do for you?
The blacksmith near the center of town is a frequent stop throughout the game, and I always enjoy hearing his warm greeting. Griswold may be a great smith, but it would seem that he has another side to him. Griswold bravely went into the cathedral not once, but twice to save someone else. First, Wirt, then returning to search for Albrecht, and finally Farnham after Lazarus abandoned them. Griswold also has a sense for old legend and magic, prompting the player multiple times to find magical items within the cathedral. Asking him about Adria, he'll express his jealousy over her ability to utilize magic, and thinking of all the wondrous things he could create if he could master the craft. Yet, Griswold is a dependable smith that knows his craft well. In a way, his own mastery of fire and metal can be akin to a kind of magic. I'll always enjoy saying hello on my stops up from the depths of hell.
Greetings, good master. Welcome to the Tavern of the Rising Sun.
If there were an anchor in Tristram that keeps the town together, it would be Ogden. The tavern owner and his wife Garda came to Tristram only months before its troubles began, and poured their life savings into opening the tavern. When demons and bandits stalked the countryside surrounding Tristram, Ogden supplied the town with food from his own stores, and took in Gillian and her grandmother when they had nowhere else to go. Few travelers visit Tristram, and of the few that do come around and stay at the Tavern of the Rising Sun, many leave in the middle of the night to avoid paying. Though the tavern has been failing in recent years, Ogden and Garda remain in Tristram. Whether bound by fear or a sense of duty, Tristram is better off with them watching over it.
What ails you, my friend?
At a time now long ago, Pepin was a priest that served under Lazarus that was trained in medicine and healing magic. When the orc's mind began to darken, Pepin left and set up a small clinic in Tristram. He had been a local in the area and had been a friend of Cain for many years. When hell festered beneath the cathedral, Pepin offered his services as a healer to anyone who needed it. He would do his best to try and heal Farnham and Wirt after they were pulled out of the cathedral, but he could not mend Farnham's broken mind, nor Wirt's lost leg. The others in town regard Pepin as a kind, if sometimes confused man, and he is a helpful ally to Aiden's quest, as he offers free healing back in town, and selling useful healing potions for a small fee.
Psst! Over here!
A child that had a knack for trouble, Wirt was kidnapped by the fallen demons and dragged down into the cathedral. He was rescued by Griswold but lost his leg in the encounter. Now, Wirt sits on the edge of town, offering his services as a smuggler of goods from outside of town. Some, like Cain and Pepin, feel pity for Wirt, whereas others, like Ogden, see him as nothing but a scoundrel that profits off of others and keeps poor company. His most interesting relation is with Griswold, however, as the blacksmith offered Wirt an apprenticeship at his shop, which Wirt refused. While he is dismissive and sarcastic with the player, he does allude to owing Griswold his life, and that he plans to repay him with a large amount of gold. Seeing as Wirt has become disillusioned with the town, believing the only hope of salvation is to flee, one can only assume he plans to repay his savior by taking him somewhere far away, somewhere safe. It would be a crime not to mention the cows just on the outskirts of Tristram. A popular rumor at the time was that clicking on one of the cows a number of times would open a portal to a secret cow level. Photoshopped images of the secret level would pop up online, and would lead to the saying, "There is no cow level." True to the saying, no cow level exists in Diablo 1, although the Hellfire expansion makes a reference to it. Instead, Diablo 2 does feature a cow level that can be accessed after the player has already beaten the game. The joke has also made it into other games, such as being a cheat code for StarCraft, being referenced in Goat Simulator, Marvel Heroes, and Minecraft Dungeons, and at one point the Cow King was a hidden encounter in Hearthstone. Perhaps my favorite reference to the cow level was in Diablo 3, where the player could fight a horde of bovine enemies with the character Chief Elder Kanai. The level serves as a double reference, as Kanai refers to Kevin Griffith, an environment designer that worked on Diablo 3 before passing away, with his player character added to the game in homage.